Hi all, my name is Dr. Linda Tucker. I'm a lawyer with the Environmental Defenders Office. I do feel like a bit of a fraud in a conference like this full of all these people who do useful things. We're here today really to meet you because we've started a project which really relies on communities around Tasmania to work with us. So just a little bit about the EDO. Some of you may have heard of us, we may have helped you at some times. We are a tiny office in Hobart, but we are also part of a national organisation. So EDO is a community legal centre, and we can't put up one of those busy funding things that we're funded by the Australian government because no governments fund us. Most community legal centres across Australia, there's several hundred of them, get Commonwealth funding, but in 2014, for some reason, ours got pulled. We received nothing from the federal government or the Tasmanian government. So we do rely on wonderful benefactors such as people here who help us out, and now across Australia. So we are now a national organisation, but we certainly maintain our very strong connections in Tasmania through our Hobart office and through our partners. We do a lot of work on, we do advices, we do law reform work, we do major litigation and education, and we do stuff like the project that we've just kicked off that I'm talking about today. And so, maybe I should stand over here, except you probably don't see me behind me. I should say, yeah, and we do stuff like this that with NRM South that I was speaking earlier, working near waterways, so understanding the legal obligations. So we do sort of work like that for a lot of organisations in Tasmania. So I probably don't need to tell you too much about our, about Tasmanian water resources, but just to go through what we're working with here. You know, Tasmania is obviously has extraordinary water resources, 12% of fresh water. We have, you know, a massive number of waterways, wetlands and water bodies, and of course people doing incredible work on it as we've just been hearing about. We've also got a statutory water management framework, but unfortunately, as is often the case in the law, you can have all the instruments you like, but if it's not implemented properly, if you don't have proper compliance, you don't have proper work being done with those instruments, you can have all the instruments you like, but it's bugger all use. All it can do actually is just, you know, paper over the problem. So what is the problem? So this is the depressing bit where we go through. So we have many pressures, obviously. So we've got all this water, we've got this massive amount of water, we've got upstream pretty good quality, but what happens as we move downstream, we have a lot of pressure on our water. And we've got Agrivision 2050, that is a commitment by the Tasmanian government to over a 5 times increase in the economic output from agricultural production. And you've got also then underpinning that the rural water use strategy. Some of you here may have done submissions to that. We made a submission to that. It was comprehensively ignored. The problem with it is that it doesn't actually take into account consideration of water quality. And I think that is quite troubling in a water use strategy. It's also not looking at land use change that may arise from its policy framework. So you've got this building up, the perfect storm, unfortunately without enough water coming from it, of pressures being put currently on our waterways, then with this massive increase that is being committed to, but then, you know, alongside of that, of course, we have the parallel issues, which we all know about, of climate change, increasing population, change to planning policies, and it's a real tangle of different pressures. So the renewable energy target, you think, great, a renewable energy target. doubling the state's renewable energy generation to 200% of our current needs, obviously, so it would be an export. A lot of that will come from wind farming, but the government's also looking to expand pumped hydro and hydrogen production, so that could also spell big impacts on water flow in catchments throughout the state. Got the population growth, which I just referred to. We're looking at a 20% increase in the next 20 or so years. Land use change then is being pushed by all of those policies, and at the same time you don't have regulation of impact of those development on the waterways. There's no longer a stormwater code in the incoming Tasmanian planning scheme, and the Natural Assets Code has limited application to protect waterways and riparian habitats. And then, yeah, along with all of that, of course, climate change. We've had modelling done on climate futures for water and catchments, but that is very old, that modelling. I think it's probably getting close to 20 years old. But that modelling showed changes to most of our rivers. So again, it's hard to know what we're actually working with, but we know it's going to change. So we need up-to-date modelling, and we need an understanding that if all of these which are talking about more use, more intensive use, more people, what are we going to do about our water in relation to that? So many of you probably know Christine Cogonor. She has just released a report through the Tasmanian Independent Science Council that came out in August. And while we talk about our water resources as being clean, green and abundant, the recent reviews show 43% of sites is impaired. Now that report, which is easily available on the internet, she actually gives, we can get the report itself now, but she gives a very good overview of that and says that in fact is probably optimistic as well, because of the way that the monitoring was done. It wasn't actually picking up all of the necessary levels of decline in the rivers that were looked at. So what's the state of our waterways? The problem that comes up, and it's a pretty, I'm just going to bring this all up because it's pretty much talking about the same thing. It's that we don't know enough. The report that was released through a right to information request was a publicly funded government report, very sexily named Temporal and Spatial Patterns in River Health across Tasmania and the Influence of Environmental Factors. Now that was, as I said, it was a government report, publicly funded, but it was not released until a right to information request was made. So you can now access that through the Quick Disclosure Law. So while we've got the Minister today saying the right things about water, and we've got work supposedly being done, it's very hard to find out what is actually happening in our waterways. So when you think about the current and increasing threats, the increasing pressures through climate change, population and other uses, if you don't know what you've got, it's very difficult to come up with effective ongoing management. So we've got it. I have to just say on the side, I'm relatively new to Tasmania, and I was shocked about right to information is always very difficult to get governments do not like to release so-called public information. There are incredible delays to get information, and then when you do, it's really hard to understand it, a lot of it. It seems to be, some genius is making it as difficult as possible to understand. You probably get a bonus for that. But yeah, so through RTI applications, there has been information released. Very importantly, that the catchment issues, the over-allocation of water currently is a real problem. So then again, when we go back to think about, well, what's going to happen when increases continue, such as through acquisition? So, we're going to run out of water, or the increased turbidity, water quality is obviously going to decline with all of the human and intersecting environmental impacts as a result. But then again, alongside of that is the flow of information is pretty much drying up as well. It's very hard to avoid water puns when you're talking about water. So we're way behind on state of environment. We're 2 cycles out on our state of environment reporting that's supposed to come out every 5 years, and the last one was due 7 years ago. We simply do not have water quality objectives to work with. And as I said, and when you do get it, it's really hard to work out what they're talking about. So, why am I here, apart from to have a whinge about water? It's that EDO has kicked off its Healthy Waterways Project. And this is very happily quite a crowded waterscape landscape at the moment. There's a lot of people doing work in this area, so that's fantastic for us. But we're lawyers, so what we want to do is work with the people who are already here and say, how can we work together? So EDO has done significant work in relation to waterways, such as the Working Waterways Guide that I've got there. We provide advice and representation on water issues, including in recent years a focus on salmon farming, and we realised something was amiss in the regulatory framework. The lack of published water quality objectives makes it impossible to draft effective water management plans. It makes it unclear what EPA and Council should be trying to achieve when they impose a permit or the salmon environmental licence conditions. If you don't have water quality objectives, it's very difficult to interrogate decisions to review, well, are those objectives being achieved? It's a cunning plan, you don't actually know what they are. So, why we want to do it is it's work that we've been doing to some extent with specific groups, specific individuals, and now we want to take that more systemic approach of trying to improve waterways management, but do it through working with communities. So this is where, hopefully, you all come in and other people here at this conference. We want to ask you, well, are you already working in this area? Do you know some local champions who are working in this area? Basically, we want to sort of jump on your coattails. It's really good if you can sort of exploit the good work of others. Because we're sitting here in our office in Hobart, we've got to get out of our office and get out into the communities. But who do we talk to? Are you already doing this work? Do you know other people who are doing this work? Do you know farmers who are trying to do this work? And who, might be happy to sort of partner with us delivering legal education, legal representation. We want to do outreach work with communities as well to say, well, do people understand that there is a right to a healthy environment? Crazy, I know, but there's this thing called the right to a healthy environment. And that's what we're about. My background is actually as a human rights lawyer. I was an environmental law academic, in the last millennium, but I actually came here to do human rights work, and that's our focus is on the human right to a healthy environment, and what does that actually mean? So if you are a farmer, if you're a scientist, if you're working in community groups, how do we realise that? So that's and at this stage, taking sort of Kane's point about crawling and then walking and running, it's very early days. We want to be responsive to what you are doing and to frame the project. So we want to take our time and be more effective by saying, well, what's already happening out there? What can we do? And as I said, we can provide education on the water laws, what they're doing now, what are the rights of the community, what are opportunities to improve the system. So we want to empower individuals and communities. And then we get to that work that we do, that sort of frontline legal advice and representation and law reform. But if we can do that in a way that's grounded in that community work, it's better informed and we think has better heft, because any law reform work, any advocacy work, the best thing is to have good case studies and good partners of people on the ground. So it's not just like, oh, it's bloody rat bags from the EDO again. It's like, no, it's the rat bags from the EDO. It's all these other lovely people. Look at them, all the things. So that is the idea. So yeah, as I've been saying right throughout, it's we want to talk to you about collaboration. And my meet me afterwards is actually after lunch, but feel free to meet me at lunchtime. We've already had a workshop in Hobart. We had great responses there. We want to keep doing that. We want to establish connections, relations with individuals. Who's bearing the brunt of water management issues? Can we help? Can you help us? So I think our work is always going to be most effective when it incorporates and responds to compelling voices, and that's the people on the front line. So please stay in touch. There's also hobart@evo.org.au is the email for our office. But yeah, as I said, come and see me at lunchtime, or I'll be lurking about after lunch in my speakery kit next door.